Okay. Okay, last concept of inner game. Who's familiar with this idea of state? Yeah? Cool. How many people like the idea of state? No. Yes? Some? So here's the thing about state. And by the way, state, for anybody who's new to this, is kind of this idea of being in flow, being happy, having things going your way, having this like feeling on top of the world kind of thing, which makes everything easier, right? It makes all the things that you do easier. And certain times if you go out at the start of the night, it's going to be really hard at first. That first approach can be really hard, really nerve-wracking. Second one a little easier, third one a little easier, and then by the end of the night, it's nothing. You feel on top of the world. That's getting into state. And getting into state is a beautiful thing. It's wonderful. It's great that it happens. Excuse me. In fact, if you really like get into state certain nights, you can get results that are exponentially better than what you're getting other nights, and that's a great acceleration to your learning curve. But the thing about state is this. When I first heard the term state introduced in the pickup community, I was so unhappy. I was so sad to hear this word. Because what immediately started happening was people would come to me on boot camps and I'd say, go do that approach. They'd be like, but I'm out of state. I'm out of state. I can't do the approach, right? And before that, I didn't hear that. Before that, I just do the approach and I'm like, drill sergeant, fucking go do it. And they're like, okay. And then they at least went and did it. Right? And so what happened was state is great. I think because state exists, it's a true concept, right? Anything that's true in life can only help you if you use it the right way, right? You never do better in life by hiding from the truth. However, the fact that state exists, a lot of guys used it in the wrong way. They started to use it as an excuse, right? State should never be an excuse, okay? So first thing, state does not equal excuse. Second thing about state is this. State is not to be pursued, okay? It is not a goal, all right? Because if state is an excuse, you're just going to become weak and not take action. If state is a goal, you're going to guarantee that you never actually get to use state in an appropriate way, okay? Do you guys know what what's this called? You know what an involuntary function is in the body? Do you guys know what voluntary and involuntary functions are? Kind of, yes, no? For example, voluntary function is if I decided to kick you in the face, that's a voluntary function. I decide logically to move my foot and put in your, not that I'm gonna do that, but like I decide to do that, right? Involuntary function is if I smell something really fucking awful and rancid and I retch and almost vomit, that happened without me deciding, let me decide to retch and vomit. It's just an instinctive thing that my body did, okay? And so a lot of things like your heart beating is an involuntary function. You're not thinking about every single time your heart beats. And in fact, if you try and think about your heart beating and regulating it, one, you'll probably have very little effect, but whatever effect you do have will probably just make it less efficient. Okay, it just won't work as well, okay? Or like, for example, like shivering when you get cold. It's hard to I can't make myself physically shiver right now because I want to, but it happens involuntarily at the right times. But understand that state is an involuntary function. Okay, state is not something that you can take direct conscious control over. But that doesn't mean it can't be useful to you. Problem is, when you're trying to turn state into a goal, you're trying to take conscious control over it. And the very fact that you're focused on state, the idea of state is this, this place of not caring, being focused on the world instead of inside your own head. Being present is an aspect of being in state. But because being in state is being outside your head instead of inside your head, thinking about state is an inside your head experience. So as long as you're thinking about it, it is actually impossible. If you're ever thinking, I want to get in state, it's actually going to be impossible to get into state while thinking that, okay? So don't turn it into a goal. Don't turn an involuntary experience into a voluntary experience, okay? And don't chase state. However, that doesn't mean that you can't motivate state, okay? You can't do it directly, but you can do it indirectly. For example, I said you can't change your heartbeat. Do you know there actually are people that can change their heartbeats, right? And here's, if you wanted to learn, this is kind of an aside, but it's interesting. How would you learn to change your heartbeat? It's a very interesting way. Maybe, I've never done it. It could work maybe. Here's the way that I know of. What you do is you take your heart and you set up a heart rate monitor with an actual indicator of the monitor and what's going on with your heart. And you don't actually try and change your heart rate. What you do is you try and change the monitor. right? And you just try and think in such ways as to change the monitor. And certain thoughts will have an effect this way, certain thoughts will have an effect the other way. And you can actually train yourself through using the monitor as the measuring device to actually regulate your heartbeat, but not by thinking about your heartbeat. It's kind of weird, right? And so you can motivate an involuntary function, but not directly. Same thing with state. You can motivate state, but not directly. Here's how you motivate state. State comes from actions. So if you try and think your way into state, you're almost never going to get there. But if you try and act your way into state, as long as you're not doing it for the state, like if you try and act your way into state and you're like, I'm doing this for the state, you're still thinking about state, right? But if you just take the actions because they're the right thing to do, or because they become fun to you, or because you're motivated through other aspects of those actions, then those actions can motivate you to state, okay? And that's why a lot of the drills that I give when I teach pickup exist, right? That's why, for example, one drill that I'll give a lot of times, which seems really counterintuitive, is I'll tell guys to go approach and intentionally fail, right? You have to fail intentionally in a creative way. And a lot of times what happens is guys are going in and they're like, what do I do? What's the right thing? How do I make it work? And as long as they're thinking about making it work, it can't possibly work, right? Because they're too much in their head. As soon as they go in and try and fail and just be creative, yeah, they're doing something that's dumb in terms of a pure game sort of standpoint, but at the same time, their attitude is right. They're getting themselves out of their head and all of a sudden they'll get success, right? And so you can use actions to motivate state, right? Examples of some actions that are good for motivating state if you want. One is, one that I'll do sometimes, go find a mirror and go stare at the mirror for 2 minutes. You're allowed to smile, smirk, or wink only. That's it, smile, smirk, or wink. And what you're doing here is you're actually changing your physiology in a positive way, right? If you make it, actually, we could do this actually as an experiment. Everybody in the room right now, smile. Right now, even if it's faked, even if it's a forced smile, like come on, it's like half-ass, yeah. Like big smile, even if it's fake, just make one, who cares? Just do it, all right? Cool. I know you can smile, all right? All right, cool, everybody, okay, now we're gonna take it one level further. Now I want you to laugh. Like laugh like, ha 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 ha. Even if you're faking it, just laugh. Just go, ha 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 ha. Good. How did that feel?
Pretty good.
Good? You guys feel better than you did before?
I did.
Right? So what happened? You just change your physiology. You start acting the way you would if you were in state, so to speak, right? And it gets you a little bit closer to being in state.
What if I tell myself that how good looking I am when I look in the mirror?
If you can actually buy into it. If you can actually buy into it and be like, I do that. I mean, I don't do it for state. I just do it because I'm narcissistic. I'm just like, look at that man, right? It works. Yeah.
I knew a bartender that used to do that. Like, because everybody he would look angry or upset while he was bartending. People would look at him and he would look like he's upset. He's just like in the moment. And he started forcing himself to smile to change the vibe.
Okay.
And eventually he would believe it. And eventually it would.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the behavior to get you there, so to speak. So that's one. Another one that you can do is, I don't do this often, but I've had guys like do like 10 jumping jacks before they go to an approach, just because they're too low energy to get them like into that place of energy. Here's a funny one actually. Anything that throws you off your rhythm actually can be helpful. For example, every once in a while when you do an approach, especially in like day game, if you like tap a girl on the shoulder and she just like gets startled, she's like, oh my God, what the hell, right? Funny enough, if a student's having a really bad day and then he has one of those, oftentimes that approach will go really well and it'll turn his whole day around. Because what was happening as he was having bad approaches, he was getting more and more in his head, he was thinking more and more, what am I gonna do on the next one? What's the next step? And he starts getting too thoughtful. And then when the girl does something like that just shocks him out of that and he has to react in the moment, all of a sudden his best self comes out, right? And so anything that shocks your system, gets you out of your head and just like gets you to stop thinking about state and actually just in the world of action, in the world of being in the moment is actually very, very effective, okay? Another method that I really like for state is to change your focus. So if your focus is on, I want her to like me, then every time she doesn't like you, that's gonna be in your head, it's gonna get you in a worse frame of mind, et cetera. But if your goal is to learn or to try something new or to experiment, that focus is an external kind of focus. It's a non-reactive type of focus, and so that focus brings you out of your head. And what will happen is instinctively, you'll just start taking on better and better behaviors. And the nice thing about that focus and why I like it is that even if you don't take on better behaviors, you're still learning because you're still trying new things, you're still experimenting. So I really, really like that for state as well. And then the third solution for state is just take action. Just take any action. Just do whatever you think is the right action, no matter how scared you are, no matter how out of state you are, and just wait for the environment or some stimulus to shock your system, and it will happen naturally. So you just give it time and let it happen, right? Now, you can't get out of state by letting it happen by standing over in the corner, right? You have to actually be taking action and interacting in order for that process to develop. But those are 3 ways, is change your physiology, change your outlook, or just do it anyway and let the situation, like there'll be a certain point where you just stop thinking inside your head because something will happen. Let an event in the outside world trigger you into that right headspace. Okay, but those are the good ways around it.